Buckle up, everyone. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are diving headfirst into the world of Bitcoin. It's March 10th, 2025, and well, to put it lightly, things are getting pretty interesting.
Interesting is certainly one way to put it. Yeah, Bitcoin is definitely on a bit of a roller coaster ride today, and everyone is trying to figure out what it all means.
You got that right. And lucky for us, we've got a mountain of sources here. News articles, market analysis, and even a few technical breakdowns. And all of it's going to help us dig up the juiciest insights for you. What's really got me hooked is that this is so much more than your average day in the crypto market, you know? We're looking at a whole bunch of things happening all at once. And honestly, it could have some pretty big implications even if you aren't a trader. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what we're here to break down. This goes way beyond just watching the numbers go up and down. It's about understanding what's really driving those changes and what it could mean for the future of Bitcoin.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Remember all that hype about Trump's strategic Bitcoin reserve? Well, it turns out it's not exactly what everyone was hoping for.
Yeah, the Business Insider article sums it up pretty well. The plan is to only use Bitcoin that's been seized in criminal investigations to build up the reserve. No big government purchases like a lot of investors were hoping for. It's definitely not the demand booster people were expecting.
So instead of a big green light for Bitcoin, it's more like a flashing yellow. Proceed with caution, you know. And the market definitely felt it. Bitcoin took a 4.2% hit after that news broke. But what really gets me thinking is what this decision says about a much bigger question. What exactly should the government's role be in the crypto world? Should they stay hands-off, be super protective, or find some middle ground? This move by Trump throws a whole new wrench into that debate.
No doubt about it. It definitely raises questions about how stable a truly decentralized market can be when governments start stepping in, even in these seemingly roundabout ways. And this isn't just a Bitcoin thing either. This has implications for the whole crypto space.
Totally. And speaking of things having a ripple effect, things are getting super interesting here. So while Bitcoin is dropping, investors are running towards a safe haven that's been around forever: gold. CoinDesk even called it a doomsday asset, which I gotta admit makes it sound way cooler than it used to.
You're right. There's definitely a psychological component at play here. When you've got all this talk about a potential recession floating around, like what we're seeing on WGNL, people start craving stability. And gold has always had this reputation for holding its value when things get shaky.
But hold on a second. Isn't Bitcoin supposed to be like the digital gold? What does the sudden gold rush say about the future of crypto as a safe haven asset? Is it failing that test?
It's a valid point, and it's one that's got analysts all over the map. Some of them, like the folks over at TheCryptoBasic, are looking at this Bitcoin dip as just a normal market correction, just a little blip on the radar. They're saying this drop isn't nearly as bad as some of the crashes we've seen before, and some indicators are actually pointing to a healthy price consolidation phase.
So they're saying this is like a Bitcoin sale. Should we all be loading up while it's cheap?
Whoa, hold your horses there. It's not that simple. We can't just ignore the bigger economic picture here. This Bitcoin dip is happening at the same time as a wider market downturn. It's affecting stocks too. Remember, everything's connected here. The global economy plays a huge role in all of this.
Okay, maybe I'll hold off on filling up my Bitcoin shopping cart for now. But this interconnectedness you're talking about, it really drives home how much Bitcoin is becoming a part of the global financial system, right?
Exactly. Trump's policy move, the economic jitters, even gold making a comeback, they're all pieces of the same puzzle. And like Investopedia points out, even companies that are just related to crypto, not even directly invested in Bitcoin, are feeling the heat. Their stock prices are dipping too. It's like a domino effect.
Whoa, this is getting complicated fast. It's a whole lot more than just Bitcoin going up or down on any given day. So for someone trying to make sense of all this, what should they be paying attention to? Where do we even begin to unpack this?
It's easy to get caught up in the headlines, but I think the real insights are often hiding in the details. Take, for example, the Block's report on Bitcoin miners. They're dealing with rising energy costs, and this drop in Bitcoin's price is squeezing them even more. Some of them might have to scale back or even shut down completely if things don't pick up.
Now, that's something I hadn't even thought about. Miners are the backbone of the whole Bitcoin network. They're the ones providing all that computing power that keeps everything running. What happens if they start dropping like flies?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it really highlights a potential conflict within the whole Bitcoin ecosystem. On the one hand, you've got the ideal of decentralization. No single entity controlling the network. But as mining gets more and more expensive, it starts favoring the bigger players, the ones who can actually afford to keep the lights on. Could this end up concentrating power going against the whole idea behind Bitcoin?
Well, it seems like both Kitco and TradingView Insights are painting a pretty worrying picture here. They're saying that certain support levels, these are kind of like the floors that hold up the price of Bitcoin. They're saying those are starting to show some cracks. And if those levels completely break down, it could be a sign of even more losses on the horizon.
Yikes, that doesn't sound too promising. But how much can we really trust these technical indicators? Can we really predict what Bitcoin's going to do just by staring at some charts? It's not really about predicting the future like you've got a crystal ball or something. Think of technical analysis more like reading tea leaves. It can give us some hints about potential trends. Maybe point out some areas where the price might find some support or hit some resistance, but it's not a foolproof method.
Okay, that makes sense. So are there any good signs in these tea leaves, or is it all just doom and gloom?
There are always a few rays of hope, even when the market's feeling down.
Right.
One Telegraph, for instance, is suggesting we might see something called a dead cat bounce.
A dead cat bounce. Okay, now you've got to explain that one. That sounds a little morbid, don't you think?
It's a pretty colorful term, I'll admit, but basically what it means is a short-lived temporary price jump in a market that's generally on a downward trend. Imagine you dropped a lifeless cat from a height. It might bounce a little bit when it hits the ground, but it's not suddenly going to spring back to life.
So it's like a false signal then, a brief pause before things keep heading downhill.
Exactly. Traders need to be super careful at how they interpret those little rallies. They might look like a good time to buy in, but they can turn into a trap real quick if the overall trend is still pointing down.
All right, so we've got these technical indicators waving some red flags, a potential dead cat bounce lurking in the shadows, and a whole lot of uncertainty about what's next. But putting the charts and the prices aside for a second, I'm really curious about the human side of all this. What are people in the crypto community saying? How are they reacting to this downturn?
Well, the crypto community is a pretty diverse bunch, so there's no single answer there. Some traders, the kind you see quoted in Bitcoinist and Crypto Potato, they see this dip as like the perfect time to buy the dip, load up on Bitcoin while it's on sale before it inevitably bounces back.
So they're the optimists then, the true believers who are convinced this is just a temporary bump in the road.
That's right. They're the ones who are taking the long view, focusing on Bitcoin's fundamental value and its potential to really shake up traditional finance.
That makes sense. They're thinking big picture. But what about the other side of the coin? Are there people panicking and selling off all their Bitcoin, heading for the exits?
Of course, there are always going to be people who react more emotionally to these market swings, and this downturn is no different. Fear and uncertainty can really push people to make rash decisions, sometimes even selling at a loss.
I get that. It's tough to stay rational when you're watching your investments shrink. But speaking of rationality, I've been wondering about something. We've been talking a lot about how this economic uncertainty is impacting Bitcoin. But isn't Bitcoin supposed to be this independent, decentralized asset, free from the whims of the traditional markets?
That's the ideal, and that was definitely a big part of what made Bitcoin so attractive in the beginning. But as we're seeing today, the reality is a bit more complicated. Bitcoin is becoming more and more connected to the global financial system, and that means it's exposed to a lot of the same forces that drive those traditional markets.
So you're saying we can't just analyze Bitcoin in a bubble. We need to be paying attention to what's happening in the rest of the world, too.
Absolutely. Global trade tensions, central bank policies, geopolitical events, all of those things have the potential to impact Bitcoin's price. It's all connected.
Whoa, that's a lot to keep track of. It almost feels like Bitcoin is losing its rebellious anti-establishment edge.
Maybe so. But it also shows that Bitcoin is maturing as an asset class. It's not some fringe experiment anymore. It's a major player on the global financial stage, for better or for worse.
That's an interesting way to think about it. So if Bitcoin's becoming more mainstream, does that mean it'll eventually have to deal with the same regulations and oversight as traditional investments? I mean, where does all this regulatory uncertainty we keep hearing about fit into all of this?
Ah, yes, the regulatory landscape. That's a whole other can of worms, isn't it? It's something that brings both anxiety and opportunity to the crypto world. On the one hand, clear regulations could bring a lot of stability and legitimacy to the market, potentially attracting big institutional investors and driving mainstream adoption.
But on the other hand, I'm guessing it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Well, on the other hand, if the regulations are too strict, they could actually stifle innovation and undermine the decentralized nature of cryptocurrencies.
Sounds like a delicate balancing act. And until we get some clearer signals from governments around the world that regulatory uncertainty is going to keep hanging over the market, adding even more volatility to what we're already seeing.
Precisely. It's like trying to sail a ship through uncharted waters. You know, there might be treasure out there, but you also know there could be hidden reefs and storms lurking around every corner.
And speaking of storms, we've got a whole bunch brewing in the Bitcoin world right now. Economic worries, technical warning signs, regulatory uncertainty, and even the most hardcore Bitcoin believers are starting to have second thoughts. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little overwhelmed.
It's definitely a lot to take in. But I think it's important to remember that volatility is just part of the game in the crypto market. It's part of what makes it so exciting and potentially so rewarding.
I get that. High risk, high reward, right?
But I think it's easy to forget about the risk part when you get caught up in all the hype.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, do your own research, and really understand what's going on before you make any investment decisions. Wise words. So with all that in mind, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about something that's been on my mind throughout this whole deep dive. We've been talking about the connection between Bitcoin and the traditional financial system. And I'm wondering, does all this volatility we're seeing in Bitcoin have the potential to spill over into other markets? Could this be like a canary in the coal mine for a bigger economic downturn?
It's a really sharp question, and it's one that a lot of economists and analysts are keeping a close eye on. While it's still a bit early to say for sure, there are some people who believe that the crypto market, because it's so sensitive to risk and investor sentiment, could actually be an early warning sign for broader economic trends.
So are you saying that Bitcoin could be like a barometer for the global economy? If Bitcoin sneezes, does the whole world catch a cold?
It's not quite as simple as that, but there's definitely a growing connection between the crypto world and the traditional financial system. What happens in one can have an impact on the other, and that's something we need to be aware of.
Okay, so we've got a potential economic storm brewing Bitcoins on shaky ground, and the crypto community is split on what it all means. So what's the takeaway for our listeners? How should they be thinking about all of this?
I think the main takeaway here is this. The crypto market is changing. It's maturing, it's becoming more integrated with the global financial system, and it's facing a whole new set of challenges.
So it's not the Wild West anymore.
Not exactly. And that means we need to adjust how we think about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. We need to move past all the hype and speculation and start looking at them through a more critical lens.
That makes sense. But it also sounds a little daunting. How can the average person keep up with all this complexity?
It's definitely a challenge, but it's not impossible. The key is to stay informed. Be critical of the information you're getting, and remember that there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to crypto.
So we need to be our own detectives, our own analysts.
In a way, yes. And that's where resources like the Deep Dive come in. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of the crypto world, provide some context and analysis, and ultimately empower you to make informed decisions.
Well said. And I think that's a perfect segue into our next topic. The long-term outlook for Bitcoin. Even with all the turmoil we've been talking about, there are still plenty of people who believe that Bitcoin has a bright future. What are they seeing that everyone else is missing?
Let's dig into that next. So yeah, even with all the doom and gloom surrounding Bitcoin right now, there's still those folks out there who are convinced it's got a bright future.
Okay, so what's their take on all this? What are they seeing that maybe others aren't?
Well, one thing is they're not getting caught up in the short-term volatility. They're looking at the bigger picture, focusing on the underlying technology and the potential it has to really revolutionize all kinds of industries.
So it's not just about making a quick buck for them. They're looking at the long game, huh?
Exactly. They see blockchain technology, the thing that Bitcoin is built on, as a game changer. It could change everything from how we manage supply chains to how we vote to how we even prove our identities online.
So they're betting that all these innovations will eventually create more demand for Bitcoin and push its value up.
That's the idea. And it's not just some blind faith either. There are already real-world examples of blockchain being used in different sectors. And as more and more people and companies start using it, the potential for Bitcoin to become a major player in this new digital economy just keeps growing.
I gotta admit, that's a pretty convincing argument. But let's be real for a second. Right now, the news is full of negativity about Bitcoin. It's hard to ignore all the talk about a recession and the warnings from those technical analysts.
It's definitely a tough time for Bitcoin, no doubt. But there's this famous quote from Warren Buffett. He said, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." And for some people, this dip in Bitcoin's price is actually a golden opportunity. They see it as a chance to stock up on Bitcoin at a discount before the market inevitably turns around.
So they're like bargain hunters. They see this as a fire sale, and they're ready to swoop in and buy up as much as they can while everyone else is running scared.
You got it. It's a contrarian approach, for sure. And it's not without its risks. But if you truly believe that Bitcoin has a bright future, this could be a pretty smart move.
I can see the logic there, but I imagine it takes a certain amount of guts to buy into Bitcoin when it feels like the world's falling apart around you.
It definitely does. But that's why it's so important to do your research and manage your risk carefully. You got to know what your investment goals are, how much risk you're comfortable with, and make decisions based on solid information, not just your emotions.
That's good advice for any investment, really, not just Bitcoin. So let's say I'm one of those long-term Bitcoin believers, and I'm thinking about buying the dip. What should I be looking out for? What are the key things to keep in mind?
Well, first things first, don't just blindly follow the hype. Do your homework. Understand the technology, how it works, the economics behind it, and all the potential risks involved. And never invest more than you can afford to lose.
Solid advice. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. But what about specific indicators or trends? What are some things that should catch our attention?
Keep a close eye on what's happening with regulations. Like we talked about earlier, if governments can provide clear and consistent rules for crypto, it could be a huge boost for Bitcoin's growth. Also, look at how institutions are adopting Bitcoin. When you see more companies and big financial players embracing Bitcoin, it adds legitimacy and stability to the whole market.
Okay, so those are the good signs. What about red flags? What are some things that should make us think twice?
Watch out for crazy price swings. I mean, yeah, Bitcoin is known for being volatile, but if the price is going up and down like a yo-yo, it could be a sign of deeper problems or maybe even manipulation. Also, be on the lookout for security breaches and scams. As the crypto space gets bigger and bigger, it's going to attract more and more bad actors. So do your research before you invest in any project or platform.
Got it. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and don't get caught up in the fear of missing out.
Exactly. Investing in cryptocurrencies should always be a well-thought-out decision, not something you rush into.
Well said. So, after all this talk about Bitcoin's crazy ups and downs, where do you stand on its future? Are you bullish, bearish, or somewhere in between?
It's a tough question to answer. I mean, I do believe Bitcoin has the potential to be a truly revolutionary technology, but it's also got some big hurdles to overcome. The next few years are going to be crucial. We'll see if it can live up to all the hype or if it just fades away.
So you're cautiously optimistic then, kind of sitting on the fence a bit.
Maybe. But I'm also genuinely excited to see how this whole story plays out. The crypto world is full of surprises. Who knows what the future holds?
I guess that's part of the appeal, right? It's unpredictable. It keeps things interesting.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating. So to our listeners, I would say stay curious, stay informed, and enjoy the ride. The world of crypto is always changing, and there's always something new to learn.
I love that. Stay curious and enjoy the ride. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the wild world of Bitcoin. We've covered a ton of ground, from Trump's strategic reserve to technical analysis to what the future might hold. It's been a whirlwind of information, but I hope you found it valuable and maybe even a little bit exciting.
It's been a pleasure exploring these complex topics with you, and we hope our insights have given you a better understanding of what's really going on in the Bitcoin market.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this. The crypto world is a fascinating and ever-changing place. Stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay curious. Until next time, happy diving.
Please help support the channel by subscribing, liking, and commenting.